Let's keep going. All right, cash. I made it on the bevel. So this is kind of how it's like listed. I made it on the bevel. A bevel is like make the edge smooth, you know? 1. There was more surface for the nails to grip. 2. There is twice the gripping surface to each seam. 3. The water will have to seep into it on a slant. Water moves easiest up and down or straight across. Number 4. In a house, people are upright 2/3 of the time, so the seams and joints are made up and down because the stress is up and down. 5. In a bed where people lie down all the time, the joints and seams are made sideways because the stress is sideways. Number 6. Except. 7. A body is not square like a cross tie. 8. Animal magnetism. 9. The animal magnetism of a dead body makes the stress come slanting, so the seams and joints of a coffin are made on a bevel. So the seams and joints of a coffin are made on a bevel. 10. You can see by an old grave that the earth sinks down on a bevel. 11. While in a natural hole, it sinks by the center, the stress being up and down. So I made it on the bevel. And number 12. So I made it on the bevel. 13. It makes a neater job. So that was he's explaining why he made it on a bevel. I guess he had 13 reasons why. And then we have Vardamon, smallest chapter in the history of man. My mother is a fish. All right, Tull, Tull. It was 10 o'clock when I got back with Peabody's team hitched on to the back of the wagon. Yeah, so Tull and Peabody's a doctor. Tull could, like I said, I don't know who he is. They had already dragged the buckboard back from where Quick found it upside down, straddle of the ditch about a mile from the spring. It was pulled out of the road at the spring, and about a dozen wagons was already there. It was Quick found it. It was Quick found it. He said the river was up and still rising. He said it had already covered the highest watermark on the bridge, piling he had ever seen. That bridge won't stand a whole lot of water, I said. Has somebody told Anse about it? I told him, Quick said. He says he reckons the boys has heard and unloaded and are on the way back by now. He says they can load up and get across. He better go on and bury her at New Hope, Armstead said. That bridge is old. I wouldn't monkey with it. His mind is set on taking her to Jefferson, Quick said. Then he better get it as soon as he can, Armstead said. Anse meets us at the door. He has shaved, but not good. There was a long cut on his jaw, and he's wearing his Sunday pants and a white shirt with a neck band button. It is drawn smooth over his hump, making it look bigger than ever, like a white shirt will, and his face is different too. He looks folks in the eye now, dignified, his face tragic and composed, shaking us by the hand as we walk up onto the porch and scrape our shoes, a little stiff in our Sunday clothes rustling, not looking full at him as he meets us. The Lord giveth, we say, the Lord giveth. That boy is not there. Peabody told about how he come into the kitchen hollering, swarming and clawing at Cora when he found out her cooking that fish, and how Dewey Dow taking them down to the barn. How he swarming and clawing at Cora when he found her cooking that fish, and how Dewey Dell taking him down to the barn. My team all right, Peabody says. All right, I tell him. I give them a bait this morning. Your buggy seems all right too. It ain't hurt. Ain't no fault of somebody's, he say. I'd give a nickel to know where that boy was when the team broke away. If it's broke anywhere, I'll fix it, I say. The women folks go on to the house. We can hear them talking and fanning. The fans go wish, 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 and then talking. The talking sounding kind of like bees murmuring in a water bucket. The men stop on the porch talking, some not looking at one another. Howdy, Vernon, they say. Howdy, Tull. Looks like more rain, it does for a fact. Yes, sir, it will rain some more. It come up quick, ain't going away slow. It don't fail. I go around to the back. Cash is filling up the holes he bored, and the top of it is trimming out plugs for them, one at a time, the wood wet and hard to work. He could cut up a tin can and hide the holes, and nobody wouldn't know the difference, wouldn't mind anyway. I have seen him spend an hour trimming out a wedge like it was glass he was working, when he could have reached around and picked up a dozen sticks and drove them into the joint and made it do. When we finish, I go back to the front. The men have gone a little piece from the house, sitting on the ends of the boards and on the sawhorses where we made it last night, some sitting and some squatting. Whitfield ain't come yet. They look at me, their eyes asking. It's about, I say, he's ready to nail. Ready to nail, like the coffin. While they are getting up, Ansei comes to the door and looks at us, and we return to the porch. We scrape our shoes again, careful, waiting for one another to go in first. Milling a little at the door. Ansei stands inside the door, dignified, composed. He waves us in and leads the way into the room. They had later in it reversed. Cash made it clock shape, like this, with every joint and seam beveled and scrubbed with a plane, tight as a drum and neat as a sewing basket. And they had later in it head to foot so it wouldn't crush her dress. It was her wedding dress and it had a flare out button, and they had laid her head to foot in it so the dress could spread out. And they had made her a veil out of a mosquito bar so the auger holes in her face wouldn't show. So her face is all sucked in. When we are going out, Whitfield comes. He is wet and muddy to the waist, coming in. The Lord comfort this house, he says. I was late because the bridge has gone. I went down to the old ford and swung my horse over. The Lord protecting me. His grace be upon this house. We go back to the trestles and plank ends and sit or squat. I know they will go, Armstead says. It's been there a long time, that bridge, Quick says. The Lord has kept it there, you mean? Uncle Billy says. I don't know a man that's touched hammer to it in 25 years. How long has it been there, Uncle Billy, Quick says. It was built in, let me see, I was in the year 1888, Uncle Billy says. I mind it because the first man across it was Peabody, coming to my house when Jordy was born. So Peabody's a doctor. If I'd have crossed it every time your wife littered since, it'd have been wore out long before this, Billy, Peabody says. We laugh, suddenly loud and suddenly quiet again. We look a little aside at one another. A lot of folks has crossed it that won't cross no more bridges, Houston says. It's a fact, Little John says. It's so. One more ain't no ways, Armstead says. It had taken them 2-3 days to got her to town in the wagon. They'd be gone a week getting her to Jefferson and back. What's Auntie so itching to take her to Jefferson for anyway, Houston says. He promised her, I say. She wanted it. She come from there. Her mind was set on it. And Auntie is set on it too, Quick says. Aye, Uncle Billy says. It's like a man that's let everything slide all his life to get set on something that will make the most trouble for everybody he knows. Well, it'll take the Lord to get her over that river now, Peabody says. Auntie can't do it. Auntie can't do it. And I reckon he will, Quick says. He's took care of Auntie a long time now. It's a fact, Little John says. Too long to quit now, Armstead says. I reckon he's like everybody else around here, Uncle Billy says. He's done it so long now he can't quit. Guys, they're just talking about him. Cash comes out. He has put on a clean shirt, his hair wet, his comb smoothed down on his brow, smooth and black as if he had pointed it onto his head. He squats stiffly among us, we watching him. You feeling this weather, ain't you? Armstead says. Cash says nothing. A broke bone always feels it, Little John says. A fellow with a broke bone can tell it coming. Lucky Cash got off with just a broke leg, Armstead says. He might have hurt himself bedrid. How far do you fall, Cash? 28 foot, 4.5 inches about. Cash says, I move over beside him. 28 foot. 28 foot, 4.5 inches about, Cash says. I move over beside him. A fellow can show slip quick on wet planks, Quick says. It's too bad, I say, but you couldn't hope it. But you couldn't hope it. It's them darn women, he says. I made it to balance with her. I made it to her measure and weight. If it takes wet boards for the folks to fall, it's fixing to be lots of falling before this spell is done. You couldn't have hoped it, I say. I don't mind the folks falling. It's the cotton and corn I mind. Neither does Peabody mind the folks falling. How about it, Doc? It's a fact. Washed clean out in the ground it will be. Seems like something is always happening to it. Of course it does. That's why it's worth anything. If nothing didn't happen and everybody made a big crop, do you reckon it would be worth the raising? Well, I be darned if I like to see my work washed out on the ground. Work I sweat over. It's a fact. A fellow wouldn't mind seeing it washed up if he could just turn on the rain himself. Who is it that man can do that? Where is the color of his eyes? Aye, the Lord made it to grow. It's his'n to wash up if he see it fitting so. You couldn't have hope it, I say. It's them darn women, he says. In the house, the women begin to sing. We hear the first line commence, beginning to swell as they take hold, and we rise and move toward the door, taking off our hats and throwing our shoes away. We do not go in. We stop at the steps, clumped, holding our hats between our legs, hands in front or behind, standing with one foot advanced and our heads lowered, looking aside, down our hats and our hands, and at the earth, or now and then at the sky, and at another's grave, composed face. Oh, at one another's grave, composed face. The song ends, the voices quaver away with the rich and dying fall. Whitfield begins, his voice is bigger than him. It's like they are not the same. It's like he is one and his voice is one, swimming on two horses side by side across the ford and coming into the house. The mud splashed, one in the one that never even got wet, triumphant and sad. Somebody in the house begins to cry. It sounds like her eyes and her voice were turned back inside her. Listening, we moved, shifting to the other leg, meeting one another's eye, making like they hadn't touched. Whitfield stops at last. The women sing again in the thick air. It's like their voices come out of the air, flowing together on in the sad, comforting tunes. When they cease, it's like they hadn't gone away. It's like they had just disappeared into the air. And when we moved, we would loose them again out of the air around us, sad and comforting. Then they finish and we put on our hats, our movements stiff like we hadn't never wore hats before. On the way home, Cora is still singing, I am bounding toward my God and my reward. She sings, sitting on the wagon, the shawl around her shoulders and the umbrella open over her, though it is not raining. So Cora's a wife, right? She has earned, I say. Wherever she went, she has her reward in being free of Anse Bundren. She laid there 3 days in that box, waiting for Darrell and Jewel to come clean back home and get a new wheel and go back to where the wagon was in the ditch. Take my team, Anse, I said. We'll wait for Orrin, he said. She wanted so. She was ever a particular woman. On the third day, they got back and they loaded her into the wagon and started it already too late. You'll have to go all the way around by Sampson's Bridge. It'll take you a day to get there. Then you'll be 40 miles from Jefferson. Take my team, Anse. We'll wait for Orrin. She wanted so. We'll wait for hours. Wait for Orrin. So that's what it means, Orrin. Wait for Orrin. O-U-R-N. And he's calling his team. He's talking about horses. It was about a mile from the house we saw him sitting on the edge of the slough, S-L-O-U-G-H. It hadn't a fish in it, never that I knowed. He looked around at us, his eyes round and calm, his face dirty, the pole across his knees. Cora was still singing. This ain't no good day to fish, I said. You come on home with us, and me and you'll go down to the river first thing in the morning to catch some fish. It's one in here, he said. Dewey Dell's seen it. You come on with us, the river's the best place. It's in here, he said. Dewey Dell's seen it. I'm bounding toward my God and my reward, Cora sung. So Anse, man, what's up?